Dearly beloved, we have gathered here today to get through this thing called Mix CD. My name is Mike, part of the SPDM crew, and I love making Mix CDs. Each week, we give our guests a theme and an 80-minute time limit for which songs they're going to pick for their Mix CD. This week, we are trying something different a little bit. So, over the past 70 Mix CDs that we've put together collectively, they've mainly gone with an audio theme. And this week we're trying something different because as I have been scouring the internet and trying to find other people to talk to on my podcast, I had this individual reach out to me and say, "Hey, I designed album covers, so would love to talk about something related to that." And I said, "Yes, that sounds like an amazing idea." So I'm happy to introduce Brett Kelley to the podcast. Brett, welcome. How's it going?
Hey, thanks for so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. I saw your post, a call for looking for people, and I'm a big music guy. Like I grew up, like I'm an artist, been drawing ever since I was 5 years old. And when you spend a lot of time drawing, there's not a lot of stuff you can do to kind of fill the ether. So music kind of fills that for you. So I figured, I feel like we'd have a lot of really fun things to talk about. I mean, I've definitely done a lot of work for bands, some album covers, some doing like promo tours for flyers
Mhm.
or just logos and stuff. So yeah, I was able to curate my list surrounding different bands that I've either done work for or have like done fan art for or have done logos for festivals that they played at and stuff like that. So we're going to bounce around a lot. It should be a really fun time. So yeah.
Awesome. I'm really looking forward to this because if anything, the two big things that I was looking to do with this podcast is what a great way to get to know someone than through music. And
Yeah.
also just I love hearing about stories. So I'm very much looking forward to that. So, Brett,
Awesome.
why don't we start at the beginning? So
Please.
let's get to know you a little bit. And how long have you been, how long have you been in the art scene? What are your kind of like artistic influences per se? Like,
Sure.
take me back all the way and let's go through your artistic journey.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks so much for asking. Yeah, I could definitely go ahead and dive in. The abbreviated version is best is that my name's Brett Kelley. I'm an artist. I reside in Western Massachusetts in New England. So I'm a little ways away from you. I'm in lovely Chicagoland. But I started drawing when I was 5. The joke that I always like to throw out is that I was a rambunctious young kid. I'm the oldest of 3 Irish sons. So once when they found out that I could draw, they were like, just keep doing that. You can, because otherwise you're just going to keep causing property damage.
Nice.
So I was able to, it was a matter of insurance rates for me to keep drawing. But through that, I found a liking for it, kept on drawing, graduated with the University of Connecticut with a bachelor's of fine art and illustration.
Nice.
And from there is where I kind of got a lot more like doing freelance illustration. So, I would get, fun little pickup jobs like design a book cover here and there. I'm very much inspired by traditional illustration, like a combination of Bill Watterson. Also, Todd McFarlane was a big influence on me. Was I was
Okay.
in high school when Spawn first came out, when Image Comics was founded. So definitely a lot of comic book influence, definitely a lot of anime influence. So Akira Toriyama from Dragon Ball Z, huge influence for me as well. So I kind of really kind of developed this artistic style that is a blending of a lot of different disciplines and backgrounds. So I take from Western comic books, I take from anime and manga, and I also take from traditional art because when I went to college, I took a lot of illustration classes, but also I took a lot of fine art. So, I normally work with traditional materials like pencils, pens, ink, all the fun stuff that you normally see in an art shop. But I also do digital. But I've also done like charcoal, and I've done my fair share of drawing naked people, and that helps kind of bring that experience in, and building better illustrations, and so that way you can make the spooky scary and this the monsters and the spaceships look more real. So it
Mhm.
all kind of influences itself at this point,
Gotcha.
which I'm very happy about. But yeah, so I'm 42 now, and I'm very thankful that once when I started trying to where how do I get from then to now. So I was also a stunt performer at a local amusement park in Massachusetts, and that from there I learned how to become a makeup artist for like the Halloween season, because they'd be like, I did a lot of creative stuff basically in the amusement park season, so I'd be in entertainment.
Oh,
So that was kind of
nice.
like the first, yeah, which is kind of fun because you're an artist and normally you spend a lot of time by yourself, and then all of a sudden you find a job where you're around a lot of creative people, and then you start collaborating, and you find people that are doing musicians, or like music work, or writing and whatnot. So that really lent itself to me all of a sudden becoming more of a freelance illustrator, where
Hmm.
people would come up to me and be like, hey, I have this thing, I have this idea, can you draw it? And I would say, yes, I can, and then repeat, and then 30 years later, and now I'm now I'm here.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Nice. So what are typically some of your favorite things that you like to draw? So
sure.
you've done a lot of different things between
Mm,
you mentioned book covers. We're going to talk about album covers as well.
yes.
So do you have a particular thing? Let's
Mhm.
go personally and then also professionally as well.
Sure. That is a wonderful. There's a wonderful distinction to make. Thank you for making that. But although I count myself lucky, because the things that I like drawing and the things that I am asked to draw typically do fall under the same kind of the same.
Like the Venn diagram, like
Thank you.
preferences
Yes.
and then what you're being asked to do,
Yes.
there's that middle ground that be like, oh,
Yes.
perfect. This is right in my wheelhouse versus
Eh,
the ones that you get asked and you're like, yeah,
mhm.
I'll give this a crack and we'll see what happens from there.
Yes, thank you. I give the words fell out of my head on that one, so thanks for picking up the slack on
I
that.
gotcha. I
Yes, the
gotcha.
Venn diagram is very close at this point. When I first started doing drawing, the Venn diagram was definitely very separated,
Hmm.
because I'm still cutting my teeth, I'm still learning how to do things, figure out the process. So I would do a lot of work that would like I've done work for the Make-A-Wish Foundation. I've done work for like Halloween institutions and stuff like that. I've done a lot of mural work. I've done a little bit of everything, which is kind of nice. But where I'm at right now, especially with my work when I work with musicians, I definitely work in a graphic style, more of a representational style, but it all depends on what the band wants. But most of the bands and musicians that I work with fall between three different categories, which when we go through my playlist will become a little bit more clear.
Hmm.
But one is metal, because I'm also a member of a local co-op called the Heavy Culture Cooperative. It's in Western Massachusetts. I don't know if any of your listeners are in New England, but if they are, come down to East Hampton. It's a wonderful 200-person member-owned community that
Nice.
caters to. Yeah, it's wonderful. It caters to basically all the elder metalheads in the Pioneer Valley of
Hmm.
Massachusetts. So I do a lot of really cool spec work and on occasion for bands that are local in New England, basically. And that can be from logo design or flyer design or tour promos. We'll get into it when we get into the playlist, but that's kind of the majority of commission work that I normally do. But my personal work, I do a lot of illustration work. I design my own enamel pens. I also create my own art books. I'm a big Halloween person. Legend has it I was supposed to have been born on October
Oh,
31st on
ooh.
Halloween, but I slept in. I was born on November 11th. So it was one of those fun things where, so I'm very much of the Halloween, the fall, autumn spirit, as it were.
Mhm.
So I'm actually in the middle of working towards a huge culmination of a 4 year long project that will be resulting in my very first solo gallery exhibition that'll be in Western
Wow.
Mass in October, and it's called Gourd Folk Fest. It's basically once a year for the last 3 or 4 years. I'll draw a couple pumpkin people that are, just drawn in very various ideas and whatnot, and I'll draw between 50 and 80 of them in a month, and then I'll just sell them out. Like I'll just put them up on my Instagram, or I'll make an art book, and they've been they've been very widely celebrated in my network of people, which I'm very grateful to be able to say. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, so that's like my professional work is like I'll typically, if I like the idea, I'll latch onto it and I'll work with a band. So I do work for metal bands. I also do work for ska bands. I also do work for DJs and whatnot on occasion. But anyone that had, or but I'll folk. I kind of touch base on anything and everything. So, but yeah, I'm very thankful because I grew up in the 2000s, so I was definitely into all different types of music back when like where like Family Values tour, where you'd be like, oh, Korn and Limp Bizkit are touring with Ice Cube and
Mhm.
and Marilyn Manson, and like all these random bands that are just touring together and making really cool stuff, and the cross pollination of influences of music really rubbed off on me as I was very very much inspired me and influenced me when I was in high school. So this that will become very apparent once we get into the nitty gritty for sure.
Nice. So you mentioned also that you started off drawing at a very young age.
Yes.
When did you make the leap to do more digital stuff? Like, was that something that
Mm-hmm.
came about more going to school, or was that more of a professional thing? And was the
Mm-hmm.
transition from going to, like physical art to digital art, was that
Mm-hmm.
a tricky transition for you?
That's a great question. Thank you. So for me personally, I was raised as a traditional artist.
Mhm.
I didn't have a lot of access. Like at 42 years old, I don't remember what my specific identification marks are for generational, but I think I'm like elder millennial, zennial, or like I'm in between there. Like I grew up.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm 40. I know exactly
Oh, perfect.
that range where you're like I'm a millennial, but I'm like the tail end of like what I consider a millennial, but I'm
Yeah.
definitely
Like
not
I
a
remember a time before technology when I grew up with technology, so I've been able to see the entire experience for sure. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, excellent. Yeah, good to see you part of the club. All right, cool.
I gotcha.
But yeah, so to answer your question directly, I was always a traditional illustrator. It's just because it was, I definitely grew up in a place where like access to technology was very limited. I definitely was much more engaged in the tactical nature of doing traditional work. So I hand draw in high school. I hand drew my very first two full comic books, like 32-page comic books. I made like one in my freshman year, one in my junior, and like I didn't print them out. I just drew them out on copy paper, glued them onto like an already made book and stuff like that, and that was like the book.
Mhm.
So I definitely did that. It wasn't until I hit college where I started learning. This is actually a really good indicator too, which is very laughable, I think, and especially in 2025. But the very first digital arts class I ever took was in UConn, and it was called Introduction to Digital Arts, where we covered InDesign, Adobe Photoshop, and Illustrator all in the same semester. Not a
Oh,
single year. That's how new it was. They were like, yeah, so this is everything that's out right now that people are using, but it's still so new that it's kind of like it's on the radar. So it's like, yeah, for a whole semester,
wow.
you do like one project in each, you'd figure out how it goes. And, so not the most enriching experiment, but at the time it was it was pretty straightforward given the time that it was. But generally speaking, 80% of the work that I've done has been traditional.
Mhm.
The last, I want to say last 5 years, I've really dedicated to doing digital work. So I've been
Mhm.
incorporating Procreate into a lot of my work. I also, if I do work in traditional, I will hand it off to people and I know how to, do the classic, like how to scan 300 DPI and, making sure whichever, what files work best depending on how you want to print it and what the file size is, depending if it's a festival or if it's an album cover, blah, 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 blah. So, yeah, so I would say that the last half decade is when I've really been growing into my digital shoes. I still do love traditional artwork though. Like I said, Bill Watterson, Calvin and Hobbes, like that was such a formative piece of media that was so important to me growing up. And also Where's Waldo? And I think if you see a little bit of my work, you can actually kind of see where it's like it's a nice cross hatching between or cross section, I should say, between the organic illustrations of watercolor that Bill Watterson had, that organic stuff, and then the mechanical that kind of showed up in the repetitive nature of line works that happen in Where's Waldo,
Hmm.
and that type of stuff. So I mean, then obviously bringing in the more heavy metal version of Todd McFarlane later on in life and whatnot, and then bringing in Akira Toriyama, where you have like the more dynamic, very bold graphic style of line work in line economy and whatnot. So for sure,
Let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk about music now.
please.
So you mentioned metal.
Yes.
What other types of music do you traditionally like to listen to? And if you
Yeah.
say everything, nothing wrong with that. So if you say everything, let's get
Mhm.
specific about, who some of your favorite artists, favorite bands.
Mhm.
Let's just start there.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I will try to do this without cringing as much as I can because I said I am a product of the 2000s. So I was definitely one of the first music that I ever really got interested in. My dad, my father, taught himself to play the guitar when he was 12 years old. So he's
Hmm.
a self-proclaimed blues man. He taught himself. He loved blues music. So I grew up listening to Little Feat, Joe Satriani,
Hmm.
Surfing with the Alien. That album was so important to me. It was the first time I heard a guitar like, rub elbows with what I later now really appreciate much more. And then I got, Green Day in high school. Green Day Dookie had come out when I was like first, second grade, which is also kind of looking back, you're like, oh wow, yeah, they had a whole classroom of fourth graders singing like, singing Welcome to Paradise all in unison. You're like, wow, that is wild.
So that was a banned album in my house.
Oh yeah.
But you know what happens when something gets banned in your house? That just makes you want to
Mm-hmm.
listen to it more. So
Yes.
I thankfully had cousins who would be like, "Yeah, let's listen to this," and that was
Fantastic.
the very important album in the grand scheme of like a musical journey. So
Oh
good
yeah,
call with that one.
100%.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. So like, and then I got into Aerosmith for a hot minute because through my parents, and then something clicked in me when I want to say 10, 11, 12, that age range. My dad had picked up Woodstock 1994 on on cassette,
Okay.
which if you remember, it's not 1999, which is much more nefarious or more infamous with Limp Bizkit and Korn being on the bill, but the earlier one from 94 had Nine Inch Nails, Rage Against the Machine, Porno for Pyros, like Primus, so many other bigger like alternative bands that that leaned more heavy. That once when I got my ears on that album is when I really started expanding. I got into Nine Inch Nails, I got into like all these other bands, and the first CD I ever bought with my own money was Korn's self-titled album. At maybe 14, 15, probably too young to listen to that album. Looking back on it, because it was very, given the content of especially that first album with that track, was it Ball Tongue? I can't remember. There were so many songs on that that were very intense in content. And then once when that happened, I became a new metal kid through and through, all the way through high school. I did not deviate much outside of that until I hit college. Once when I got and I will not to make a fool of myself too bad, but like I really dug my heels in deep where like Spawn soundtrack when the movie came out, like that was a really fascinating to me. I did love metal, but I also loved all different types of music and whatnot. Like when ICP came out, I got that. I got my hands on an old Snoop Dogg album because they had, because he had toured with Korn and the Family Values tour. So like I said, like a lot of culminating in different musical styles coming back and forth. I got really into 311 for a hot minute, Sublime, obviously, with like, because you're kind of, you back in the day, you'd still be in kind of like, I don't want to say a monoculture, but it was a popular culture like
Yep.
TRL, where like everyone generally, even if you weren't like, I know, right?
You,
That to blast from the past,
oh,
but
TRL.
like
Yeah.
there is something to appreciate where it's like back in those days where you're like, even if you weren't aware, even if it wasn't like your music, you were still exposed to it and you still
Mhm.
knew about it,
Yep.
like you could still like be stoked that you know like Freak on a Leash, it was like not like on its 60th day as number one, but you'd still, in order to do that, you listen to Shakira, Britney, NSYNC, Goo Goo Dolls,
it
whatever
was
was on the
it
thing
was
on that
very
time.
it was a well-rounded. It's kind of the same
Yeah,
thing with old school radio as well,
yeah,
is that if you're looking for a way to organically discover music, those were the two ways to do it. And
yeah.
nowadays that's not how it is for a lot of people. They'll
Yeah.
stick with like unless you're doing like traditional radio or like even Sirius XM, that's
Hmm.
kind of just hyper specialized. It's like, hey, we're only
Yeah.
going to listen to music from 2000 to 2009 R&B with artists that only start from M to Z. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, like thanks, Sirius. I didn't realize that we were going to get this specific. But
Yeah.
at the same time, it's the thing that kind of sucks about that is you don't get as much diversity in terms of what you're listening to, and
Yeah.
you're potentially missing out on things unless you get things in like a playlist, you get something recommended to you. It just right place, right time. And
Yeah.
that's like for us, we grew up with that. Right place, right time is the only way that we were able to discover new music at the end of the
Yeah.
day. So I
No, 100%.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I'll try and speed up a little bit because it gets a little wonky from here. But basically,
Mm,
like I ran through as much new metal as I could, Corn, Limp Bizkit, and then I got it. Like Stained was on there for sure. But then I started like finding like like Six Gig and Apartment 26, and like and because of and because of the Spawn soundtrack, and then I picked up the Lost Highway soundtrack because Trent Reznor had done the album for it. That got
mhm,
me into Rammstein, which then got me in industrial metal. And then even during that time, I got involved in martial arts when I was in high school, and that
mhm.
was really important to me. I became very physically active, but then because of that, I was also part of my martial arts studio's demo team, which then brought me into the world of techno.
Mm, mm,
So I started like Louis DeVito's like New York City Underground mixes. I would mainline for hours on end doing choreography for like trying to think of some of the other ones that really stood out. But then I also got really into breakdancing because also another band that I got into before I got into metal, oddly enough, MC Hammer, I was really into. Like obviously sorry, the original Too Legit to Quit was the
too,
album that I really liked. Obviously their first song, his
ham,
breakout song, which I can't
yeah,
think of off the top of
it's
my head.
like hammer time. Yeah,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
or can't
like
touch this. It's you can't touch
yes,
this.
Can't Touch
That's
This.
right.
Thank you.
That's
I
right.
can't believe it. I just said I really like what's the name of that song? But yeah, yeah. But in any event, but yes, yeah, like Can't Touch This, obviously. But then like there's his follow up album I liked more than his first album, but because of that, like there was a bunch of people in his posse. If you watch his music videos, he's really good at dancing. I learned how to dance from watching MC Hammer, and he
Mhm.
had a guy in his crew named No Bones, and he was featured in the Adams Family song that they did
Yeah,
with Adams Family Values. Yeah,
they do what they want to say what they
say what
want
they
to
want to
hear.
say.
Yeah,
They want to play.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
So bonkers. But like No Bones was featured in that, and he was an incredible breakdancer, and he did like all these really cool contortions, and he was a contortionist and whatnot. So like I started falling down that rabbit hole of different types of music. So then that got me into freestylers. It made me much more receptive to like Linkin Park, which was much more hip hop influenced.
yeah.
And then I got really into breakbeats and stuff. So yeah, and then when I got into college, I kind of grew out a little bit of like my new metal phase, kind of got a little guilty, but then I found metalcore. So I got into Soilwork, In Flames, uh, and a couple other bands that were like that. But then I also kept progressing with hip hop and just underground hip hop, like so stuff that was like KRS-One. There was a band that comes up on my list called Ugly Duckling. They're an incredible like old school hip hop band that were just kind of far left to center. I love Deltron 3030, Del the Funky Homo Sapien. If you remember, he's one of the guys that Deltron or Del. He's the guy that's the ghost on the early Gorillaz album that would rap
Okay.
on Clint Eastwood. Yeah, yeah. Like he's from England, I think, which makes sense because Gorillaz are. But like I love that stuff where it's just like it kind of echoes the same dispersion where like hip hop was really big, and then Ludacris and Dirty South hip hop kind of came up where like every hip hop version had its own regional and like different
Mhm.
pop up. New metal kind of had its own version of that, but like I loved Soulfly too. Like that for some reason that got me really into. I loved Soulfly going in like when I was going burning through new metal. I was like, all right, who's going through their new metal phase? Fear Factory, Soulfly, Powerman 5000, Rob Zombie, like all those bands as well. I cycled through a lot. But then I'm in college. One of my friends in college, a couple of my friends were in ska bands. So like I went to ska shows for the first time ever. And then I got really into ska. And granted, that was third wave ska at the time. Real Big Fish came out, like which was the huge major smash, and then it moved into swing music with like Big Bad Voodoo Daddy, and like the Mask kind of came out and like really pushed that to the like that weird retro era of
Yeah.
movies and culture
Hmm.
for a hot minute. But even that pushed me into even learning more about ska music, and I love the history of ska. And my favorite wave, if you're for those in the know, is like second wave. I love second wave, or bands that are inspired or influenced by second wave. So like the Toasters, Bad Manners, the Selector, Madness, Madball, like all those types of bands that were really like that carried on. And I'm still a big fan of first wave too, though. I mean, Bob Marley and the Wailers originally were
Hmm.
a ska band before they went over to full reggae. And like just like if you're not familiar with ska music in general, like I warmly welcome you to like just look at the history of it. It's so fascinating. Gets a little sad when it hits the United States, unfortunately, but it's kind of how it goes when you
That's
have
kind
record
of
companies
that's
involved.
well, that's how it goes with a lot of different types of music, unfortunately,
Yeah.
that
Yes.
the US standards when it comes to music are let's just say different, right?
Yes.
So,
Agreed.
mhm.
Yeah, and I think at long last I can put the nail in the bed. Like I've been, I still branch out and expand, but now I would say that I've been a resident of Western Mass for the last 11 years, although I've lived in and around the area for a very long time. But my love of music is still very grassroots. So
Mhm.
like most of the music that I listen to, which will be evidenced on our list, on the list that I've curated, a lot of the music that I have is from bands that I either know personally or I've worked with personally or I enjoy and are not signed to a label or a label of note or whatever, that they're DIY or die basically.
Ah, okay.
Or they do it themselves, or they just have a really interesting history and whatnot. Because there was actually a hot minute also in the mid 2010s where I was really into steampunk.
Mhm.
So like, and steampunk is just a really interesting mix of just different sci-fi and cultural and like Ren Fair. Like it's a very interesting convergence of like multiple different facets of nerddom, and with that it comes with different musical inclinations. So there are a couple bands that I met that are on my list that I met or saw playing at steampunk conventions in Jersey.
Mhm.
So like it was, so yeah, this is going to be a very eclectic, very weird mix, I am sure.
Well, let's kind of dive into your list a little bit and
Please.
kind of talk to me a little bit about, you know, when we finally settled on, album covers and kind of like the
Yeah.
ones that you like to do, I'm sure just paring that down to like
Mm.
80 minutes, I'm sure it's that's the biggest knock that I get for the show. Like, hey, is there any way that I can go over 80 minutes? It's like you can go
Hmm.
a couple minutes over, but
Yeah.
if it's like 210 minutes, kind of
Yeah.
defeats the purpose. But
Yeah.
what were you ultimately looking for with, given the 80-minute time limit? What were the
Hmm.
main things that you were looking for when you were putting your playlist together?
Yes. So, I mean, I come to you as a humble artist, might I add.
Mhm.
So the list of bands that I have, like I have designed album covers for, but I think I've said this before too, so I apologize for the broken record,
That's all
or
good.
deja vu, if you will.
All good.
But a lot of the bands that I listed, if I didn't do work directly for them or were not commissioned by them, they are bands that I have also like reached out and done like fan art for.
Oh,
So
okay.
like in 2020 and 2021, I was part of my job. I also worked at an art supply company for about a decade or so, and part of that was just developing new content for companies and the like, for a website. And one of the things that I came up with was called Jukebox July. So it
Hmm.
was basically like like Inktober, basically, but musically inclined.
Okay.
So from that list, I would, for every day for the month of July, I would be like, write a song for a band that you really like, or the band that thinks, a song that pairs well with fireworks for the 4th of July, as an
Oh.
arbitrary example.
Hmm.
So, and it was online, so I would do that. I did that every single day, and I really tried to focus on bands that I like and bands that I know the members of and that I converse with and I'm friends with online. And so like through that, I did a lot of what you would probably consider fan art, where I'd be
Yeah.
like, they didn't ask me for this, but I like this band's song, so I put it up, and then they really liked it and they reshared it and whatnot. So that was kind of like an interesting way. And plus, if any artists out there are interested, that actually can be a really interesting way of helping to, build connections with other creative people to help get yourself work. So
Mhm.
I'm not much of a gatekeeper here. It's just kind of like a fun, creative people helping creative people, especially when you're on the DIY level, is so important.
Yeah.
And I really do attribute whatever success I may have as an independent artist, I attribute to that, of being a creative that's around other creatives, and we're all just around people that like and respect each other, and we're making stuff with the ultimate hope of making something cool together.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I think that hopefully that helps answer the question a little bit. But yeah,
Yeah.
so like
Yeah.
the list, yeah, the list I broke down into three different like phases. One is bands that I've directly done work for, and that falls into album design, logo design, tour flyer design, so stuff that would be used for a band to present to an audience. The second is the fan art thing that I told you about, and then the third one, a rule bender, but it's basically bands that I really love and have enjoyed and have met through festivals that I've done work for as well.
So
Yeah.
there's still a connection. We're not
Yeah.
bending rules too much or anything like that. You're all good with that. Okay, so let's kind of go through, like, I try to break this up into like groups of three, but since you've
Sure.
got a clear different like delineation
Mhm.
between, all these different eras that you're kind of talking about on this
Yeah.
list, why don't we kind of just start there? So you're the first part of this list. So
Mhm.
we've got a couple songs here from artists. We've got Faith in the Glitch.
Yes.
We've got Seven Spires and Oxen
Mhm.
Band, or just Oxen.
Yep.
Uh,
Oxen. Yeah.
so why don't we start with those three? So
Sure.
go ahead and just go whichever ones you want to talk about first, and just
Yeah.
like share like what you did for them and why'd
Yeah.
you pick them for the list.
Sure. Yeah. So I think these three to start out were really interesting choices, because they're a little bit all over the place in terms of like genre. But these are the three bands. They're probably the first batch of musical artists that reached out to me to do work for them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Faith in the Glitch, Neon Afterburner. If this is all compiled through YouTube, so when you look up on if you look up on the if you to look up my list on YouTube, you could see like I designed the album for Faith in the Glitch, Neon Afterburner. Faith in the Glitch is Joshua Latman. He's a DJ from Brooklyn, New York. I met him in New Jersey at the steampunk event that I told you about. He used to spin electro swing pretty regularly, and he also spins at another big like niche event called a Magfest, Music and Gaming Festival, and also in New Jersey,
Oh,
or
okay.
is it Jersey and Maryland? It's a really cool festival. It's a bigger one in New England, or at least in the Northeast, I should say. So like we met through the steampunk community, and he'd reached out knowing that I was an artist, and he had this very specific design what he wanted for his album cover, which was like an overly illustrated version, a cartoonized version that's kind of like him. I'm in front of a pulpit, basically preaching to the music, that preaching in like a synth wave, dark wave kind of vibe, which is what this album was. What this album was kind of like centered around. But so he makes his own music, and he also DJs his own music, and he does his own. You can find him on YouTube. He spins weekly his own show, and he bounces around between like he does a lot of hardcore kind of like techno type of stuff. So like dark wave. I'm trying to think of some of the other stuff that he does, but he also does synth wave and retro wave. So a lot of like the old school '80s like neon type of stuff. Like he's very much into too as well. But he has like 4 or 5 different genres that he likes to bounce around in between. And he's a really great guy. Like I'm trying to get him to come up from Brooklyn to DJ the party at that gallery event I was
Hmm.
telling you about in October. So, because he's a really good dude. I really, and it's one of those things where like, when you befriend someone that does something and you really hope you wish the best for them, like I was very happy to be able to do that work for him, and he really enjoyed the work. So yeah, that's kind of what got the ball rolling on that one. It was
Mhm.
very, very quick, straightforward. Seven Spires actually was the first band that I ever did work for through a festival that I've been tabling and working at since 2018, called RPM Fest, which I know I'm pointing out a visual thing. Sorry for all you audio listeners, but I'm currently wearing a trucker hat that says
I,
RPM Fest on it.
I can attest that it does say RPM Fest on it.
Yeah.
It looks like flame colors. So like you've
Yes.
got your red, your orange,
Mm-hmm.
a little bit of yellow there. The hat's
Yep.
black. So yes, I can attest that this hat is
Yeah.
in fact real and Brett
Yeah.
is wearing it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate that secondary. I wish I should call on you for more frequent when I have to get upset. I might have to have you on. I might have to have you on speed dial when I have other conversations with people.
I
Like, it's
gotcha.
true. Just believe me. Listen to Mike. But yeah. So basically, RPM Fest. It's a festival that's been going on for about 10 years in Western Massachusetts. I'm friends with all the people that run it. RPM Fest stands for Rock, Punk, and Metal. And like I said, it's all grassroots, run by local people. And because of that, it's a 3-day music festival, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Normally happens the last weekend in August or the first weekend in September, depending. And there's normally 50 to 60 bands that play over the course of 3 days. You camp outdoors. There's 3 stages. And this band, Seven Spires, they're a symphonic metal band,
Hmm.
I believe, and they're probably they're an incredibly successful metal act. Their lead singer, Adrienne Cowan, phenomenal singer. She sings opera, but also can sing gutturals and
Oh,
screams, like the whole spectrum. She can nail it, and she's so really cool. And their bass player, Peter Dorena, they played in 2018 at the Rock Stage. They were walking by, and I was tabling there. I designed the logo for the album for the festival that year. I'm sorry, and I was just kind of hanging out. And apparently, they liked the logo, and they were just walking by. They saw my work, liked what I was doing, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's cool." Just talk to them a little bit. And they're local. They're based out of Eastern Massachusetts, so closer
hmm.
to Boston. I'm on the other side of the state,
Gotcha.
the
Yeah.
boring shaped side. Yeah. But like, they were there, and they were like, "Hey, yeah, like, we're coming up, we're releasing a new album that's nautical themed. So, and we see you draw a lot of Cthulhu type of stuff and monsters
Mm.
and whatnot. Like, could we get you to draw something, and we'll put it on a shirt?" And I was very thankful for them to enlist me for that. And I designed that for them. And like I said, the Seven Spires, like I said, prolific band. I believe that they have recently toured with Dream Theater. So,
Oh,
like, they're
wow.
an international touring band. Like, they I think they're in the middle of a European tour right now. They'll
Hmm.
tour Europe every once in a while, like every other year. They have a new tour cycle and whatnot. Incredibly talented band. So for the sake of what they did, I hand drew the design. I handed it off to them, and then they were able to hand that off to a printer, and they were able to translate it. And I got my own T-shirt based off of it.
Nice.
And yeah, so that was probably one of the higher profile works that I've done. And it's great because it's like, I've never been a big melodic metal fan, but it also speaks to the theme that I'm talking about. Is like, when you see music live, you build a relationship to it that you would not build if you're just listening to it,
Yep,
which is great. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. And Seven Spires is a primary example for me of being like, if you just put that album on, I would appreciate it. I'll be like, this is really good. It's just not my cup of tea. But I saw them perform live. They love performing. They put on a hell of a show. And just because of that, like, they asked me, before they played, and I was like, "Oh yeah, no, that's cool." And I didn't know who they were, and then I saw them perform, and I was blown away. And I was like, "I'm
Oh.
gonna do artwork for these people. This is
Hmm.
incredible." I mean, I hope they listen to this, because I hope they know how much I appreciate them giving me the opportunity to do that work, and how much I respect and appreciate them. And I'm so stoked that they're still going. They're still putting out records and touring the world and stuff, and they're living the dream. And they're so good. So yeah, so that's like definitely another big one. Like, I definitely front loaded all the heavy hitters on this one.
Hmm.
And Oxen is a bit of a. Oxen is part of like a multi-band project that will recur multiple times in this, but Oxen is a band that is local to Western Mass. Their their guitarist and one of their singers, Kristen Yelly, phenomenal guy. He's part of a band that I was a big fan of when I was in high school, that was regional to Western Mass. And Christian Yelly also has his own recording studio. He's worked with, like, Deftones and a couple members of other more prominent bands and whatnot, doing independent projects and stuff like that. He's a big music producer. Western Mass, surprisingly, apparently that's just kind of where a lot of music producers go to retire after they move out of New York for
Oh
some
shit.
reason, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know that until I moved into town. But there's, for a little while, the joke I would say is that in the 2010s, if you spit in the air, there'd be two recording studios that could hear the drop on the beat, like, because there's just a lot of really cool, talented people, and Chris Daniele is definitely one of them. He has recently moved up to Vermont, and he still records music, but he's also become a prolific photographer. And I'm also friends with their drummer Hans, their guitarist and bassist Eric and Ben, respectively. But they're another band that was local that had me design a sweatshirt design for them. And rumor has it, from what I'd heard, that they had sold out of their first run of it because it was so well received, which I was very thankful for. And it was another big deal where it was like they paid me they paid me very well for the work that I did for them, and I'm very thankful for that. I'm actually, yeah. So there's more to that story, but we'll be able to expound on that the further we get down the list. But yeah, cool. Those are like the three bigger like commission jobs where like the band like either knew me or saw my work, was like, I like your work, can you please do something for me? I was able to do that, and then they were very thankful for that. So yeah,
I suppose I should have asked you this beforehand a little bit, because
Mhm.
the whole process for you of getting commissioned as an artist,
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a certain amount of balance that needs to be struck between creative liberties that you get as the artist and what, like how involved the band or whoever is your commissionee, I suppose, in terms of like controlling a little bit more about what actually gets done. So, for just for my sake, because I'm,
Sure.
this is all kind of new to me, but
Yeah.
where do you strike that balance? Like, are you somebody who's like, I want full creative liberty, or are you someone who's more collaborative? Like, where do you draw the line?
Sure. For me,
Draw the line.
yeah, I love that. Nope, that's good. Keep that. Very well said. So yeah, for me personally, I'm a people pleaser. So generally speaking, only up until recently now, like, have I reached a point in my career, I guess. I mean, I'm 42. I've been drawing for a long time. I suppose career would be the apt word to use. But for me personally, because like I'm definitely, I consider myself to be a blue collar creative person. That means
Gotcha.
I work for a living. I moonlight as an artist. It's not my main job. I work a 40-hour day job. So like, which also makes it more special when a band reaches out to me, or anyone reaches out to me for spec work, because it's just like, I'm not like a well-known artist, I'm not selling out galleries, or I'm not at that level, basically. So because of that, I really do try and go the extra mile for people. However, for the last couple of years, because I've been working on a lot of personal work, I've had to really kind of rewire how I take commissions. And unfortunately, that requires having to say no sometimes. Like, I've actually been having to say no a lot more recently, because my dance cards have been like ridiculous in a good way. It's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
But to better answer your question in terms of what the process is, it varies depending on what the expectations are of the end product. So like, because it all depends. Every single commission really does have its own arc, depending on who, it depends on what the band is looking for, how committed or how like focused they are on the vision that they have for themselves, versus what I'm able to do as an artist and what I can provide for that. So generally speaking, most of the work that I've been doing lately, it has definitely been, I'm thankful to say, is that a lot of it has been like, hey, like, we have this tour, like, you're familiar with our band, like, what do you have in mind? And then I'll be like, all right. So then I go for the sketch stage, where I'll hammer out like an idea. Like, my favorite stage is literally the conceptual stage, because it's where I'm the most efficient personally with me. Like, I'm much more of an idea guy. I'm the weirdo that would be like, Brett, give me the name of a superhero that has lightning powers or whatever. And I'll be like, oh, Voltergeist. And they'll be like, what? Okay, cool. And I'll be like, yeah. Like that's like me. So like
Gotcha. Hmm.
yeah, like my ears perk up whenever I'm in that phase where I'm like, all right, like what's your band name? What are the themes and the genres you want to use, or what's the vision basically? And then, and you're right, part of it is figuring out like how much of the vision do you have that you want me to fill in, if at all, or if you're just giving me like,
Just
basically a
random stuff.
laundry list that I need to
Yeah.
check off basically. Yeah, yeah. And I've done it all, because especially if the design, if the idea is cool, like I'm not going to change the cool idea if the idea is cool. So like, but sometimes it does, it does take a little bit of a work, because like prime example, Oxen, when they approached me to do their design, they were like, oh, we're looking for like a reaper or some, a cloth figure holding a lamb, alluding to the oxen part. And I was like, all right, cool. So I drew like 5, 6, 7 different designs, and they're like, it's not quite exactly it. Could you give, instead of it just being a reaper, could you make it like, could you have it be like a skull of an ox? And I was like, oh yeah, done. And then once when we got that figured out, they're like, that's perfect. Yeah, we'll just do that. And I was like, all right, cool. So sometimes it happens that way, but more recently I've been lucky where like, they'll be like, oh yeah, like we don't have much of an idea for, for like this. So like we trust you. So if you have a couple different ideas, throw them at me. And then, that's where I send out the thumbnails, and I'll be like, all right, so this is what I have in mind. This will X, Y, and Z. This will be this will be that. Does this work for you? And then they'll be like, that's cool. Or, and then from there, I go from the thumbnail the stage to drawing, where I'll do like a fine, like, a pretty decent fine drawing, very comic booky actually.
Hmm.
You work from thumbnails, and then you go to pencils, to inks, and then to final color. I mean, for me, because I'm still a traditional artist, I don't do digital until I have to hit color. So basically, most of the time, if you commission me to do a drawing, there will be a physical copy of it somewhere, either in pencil, or at least in pencil, if not in ink. And then the final product will be the deliverable, if you will, to use inside baseball terms.
There we go.
That will be a full color digital. That'll be a PNG, JPEG, Photoshop document, whatever it is that you need it to be in order for it to translate to whatever you're putting it on.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go with your next three, unless there is a specific line that goes from, artists you've worked directly with versus the fan art piece.
There is a cutoff. We're not there yet.
Okay.
Luckily, like we still got a couple more to go. And then, unfortunately, I think with my playlist, it got a little. I did do a last minute substitution, so I apologize. We'll
No,
get
don't.
to it if it comes up, but that's fine. But yeah, for right now, we have a couple more to go through before the fan art transition kind of makes its way over.
Cool. Okay. So
Yeah.
let's go with, we've got a band called The Aberration,
Yes.
and then Creepin, sorry, Cadavers,
Yep.
and
No,
Big
no problem.
Scat. So
Yes.
walk me through those
Sure.
three.
Yeah, and those are three fairly different bands for sure. So the Aberration is definitely a prog metal kind of like thrash outfit. It was founded by a guy that I had met through. I believe I had met through actually Creeping Cadavers. Believe it or not, I didn't
Hmm.
realize that the family tree was going to be that close. But like I said, I'm local, so they're all local bands. There's a lot of bleed over.
Mhm.
But Travis O'Connell, who runs a t-shirt printing shop, he had known my work through doing some other local material. And The Aberration is a really interesting band. It used to be a two-person act for a hot minute back in the early, I want to say, mid 2010s, like 2014 to 2018, I want to say.
Mhm.
And then it expanded to a three-piece. And like I said, Travis, he, in addition to having this being like his big musical project, he also had his own shirt company. And he'd asked me to, like, he'd actually seen a couple like initial drawings that I had actually done. This one was actually really interesting because this one was business done that like regarding work that I'd already made, and that doesn't happen too often where people look at. I mean, I draw my own work and post it online all the time, but this was the first time someone was like, I drew something, posted it, and it was done. And then Travis was kind enough to be like, "Hey, man, like, are you doing anything with this drawing you did of a skull with like speakers coming out of the mouth and like with like phone jacks coming out of the like making like a mohawk or whatever? Like, are you doing anything with that? Because I'm working on making some Aberration merch, and I would love to have that on a hoodie." And he was like, I can't, like, and we did product trade. So he was like, I can't pay a lot for it, but if you want, I'll print it on a buttload of like merch for you, and you can just wear that. And I'm like, heck yeah, if you yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
you're gonna print it on a comfy, cozy hoodie for me. Let me add it to my Western Mass vest. All right, cool, let's do it. So like, yeah, I was very thankful for that, and that was one of the things. And yeah, so and he printed it in a really interesting way. It was like white on black and then black on white because it was an ink drawing on top of that. So it wasn't even what I would necessarily consider a completely realized illustration, but he nailed it. Like because he screen printed it himself in his apartment with his machine, and he made a whole bunch of really cool stuff with it. He put it on like little beer koozies with the logo for Apparition and whatnot. It was a really cool design, and I have it listed on my socials somewhere, like
Nice.
on my Facebook page specifically, my art page. But yeah, so that was really cool, and I think he used that up until the band broke up. I want to say in the late 2010s. I want to say like 2017, 18 or whatnot. Like he moved elsewhere, and like life happens.
Life happens.
Just,
Yep. That's
exactly.
true.
So that was a really fun project. And then Creeping Cadavers was the very first band that I ever designed a full album cover for. And Creeping Cadavers is a psychobilly rockabilly band that are based out of Western Mass.
Okay.
3 band members: Al Liptak, Scott, and Jeff. All phenomenal musicians. They've toured with like not that the psychobilly, especially they're most active in like the 2010s and the 2015 and whatnot. But they're still around. They do reunion shows every once in a while. But phenomenal musicians, and they've toured with like the Misfits and like Batmobile and a bunch of other really upper tier, like well known rockabilly acts that are still active in the United States. There's not many of them, but there are enough. Tiger Army, I'm sure they played with, and they've done. They've had work showed up. This is a callback. Old PlayStation 2 game. You ever heard of the game called Wet?
Yes.
It's a Western. Creeping Cadavers has a song on that album.
Really?
Aquarium. Yep. My aquarium.
Okay.
Aquarium. Yeah, that's all right. I think it's Aquarium. I might be wrong on that, but that was like one of their big breakout songs, and their drummer Al, phenomenal videographer and photographer. So he would normally direct all the band's music videos, and I've worked with him for over the last few years. Like I've done like horror makeup and special effects for video projects he's been on, which is really cool. But like they had this idea for this album, and they didn't make a full album for. Oh hey, it's all good.
That I got nothing with that.
It's
I don't know what
it's okay.
happened. Like all of a sudden the power went out and
Oh
it's not
gosh.
even raining outside. So
Oh wow.
cool.
That's all good, man. Yeah, it's all good.
Okay.
Cool,
So
cool.
where were we?
I was in the middle of rambling about Creeping Cadavers.
All right. So
Yeah,
go ahead.
sure. Yeah, yeah. So Al Liptak, really great guy. He hit me up for their third album that went directly to production through CD Baby, Creeping Cadavers 3D, and that when you look at the album, you can definitely see that it was the very first album that I've ever designed for them. Designed proper, because I'd done it completely traditional. I scanned it. There was no digital inclination at all, which is kind of part of the charm of it, at least.
Mhm.
But the album cover was my version of drawing all 3 band members as different monsters,
Yep.
and also an homage to the Friday the 13th in 3D album, like where the one that has Jason coming through the window, basically.
Mhm.
Yes. So it was basically that, but Al Liptak, he had a mohawk at the time. He was the zombie. Scott, their bassist, who had an amazing neon green bass. He called it the Green Monster, like stand up bass, and he had a wedge mohawk, very like the most rockabilly. Like you envision what a rockabilly band looks like. He was the pinnacle of it. He was Frankenstein hammering through with like a knife, and then Jeff, I drew him as a vampire, kind of werewolf, like Lost Boys type of thing. And the 3 of them were smashing through this window forward, and then I had a very like graphic block letter Creeping Cadavers in 3D, like creeping with the apostrophe, and I made the apostrophe a little coffin. I thought that was a really fun little touch there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was the very first album I'd ever done, and another really big, like what you call like a milestone, basically, of
Mhm.
being like, it's the first time a band had ever done that. And I know the band for a while. I used to I used to see them perform live with all my friends from high school, and like I would yeah, it was a lot of fun. They played a lot of really awesome shows all the way up and down through Connecticut and Western Mass. So
Nice.
yeah,
Um,
and then yeah, so good.
so question I have for you is,
Please.
since you've done a fair amount of physical, like you mentioned your process, how you start physical
Yes.
art like on paper, and then
Hmm.
once it comes to color, then that's when you digitize it. Do
Yep.
you keep all of your art, like all of the drawings that you do, or is
Yes.
there a statutes of limitation where you're like, well, I guess this one's okay to go, but do you keep them all?
I generally do, especially like it's a kind of like a tough life lesson I've had over the years where I used to not be precious with my artwork at all. I don't like a prime example. I told you about when I was in high school. Like I literally made two comic books from scratch when I was in high school, and arguably those two comic books that I had made were responsible for me getting to UConn's art program. Because like I brought them with me, I handed them to my advisor at the time, Coraline Deibler, and she looked at them, looked at me, and was like, "You did this just arbitrary of nothing, while also doing all these other things. You made these from scratch." And I was like, "Yes, yeah, yes, I did." And she saw something in me and brought me in. I unfortunately, through whatever reason, as I grew older, I did not value that work and I threw it out.
Mm.
And now at 42 years old, I definitely have come to regret that. And the way that I've tried to make up for that is that I will generally have the final product. If you pay me for the final product, you get the final product. But I will also, in turn, hold on to the building blocks that I made for those.
Hmm.
And I my studio is a bit of a disaster at the time because I'm in the middle of production mode on a million things. But
Yeah.
there is a portfolio around here somewhere that does have all of the, if not all the finished pieces, at least all of the sketches and all the like the building blocks up to those, like all the templates, if you will. But
Gotcha.
I do have those for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that just kind of came to mind. Let's
Yeah.
let's go with the big stat. Uh,
Yes. So this one's a fun story. So Big Stat, he's a guy that I went to high school with. And
oh,
he's the first, like I mentioned before, I used to be a stunt performer, and I did a lot of breakdancing. Big Stat, his real name's well, his civilian name is Gary Monteleone.
mm,
Wonderful guy. He's been doing rap ever since I met him in high school. Me and him, and he's a DJ as well. At the time, he was a phenomenal DJ. He had his own spin decks in his house, and I believe it was junior or senior year. We had a talent show, and we both decided to do a breakdance slash DJ, basically like a fundamental elements of hip hop
mm,
type of showcase for our school
nice.
in Suffield, Connecticut. So not exactly like so very northern Connecticut area,
Hmm.
but basically like he had, oh no, my brain's gonna flatline. So he spun Method Man and Redman. Oh no, my brain cannot think of track, but it was one of the it was a Method Man Redman track that had just recently come out that was so good, and I breakdanced to it. He came out freestyled as well as an interlude. I came back and breakdanced again, and then ever since then we kind of parted and went our separate ways. And he's rapped it like Rock the Bells. He's toured with Method Man and Redman.
Nice.
He's put out multiple albums. Like I think one of his biggest album releases after were Don't Quit Your Day Job. And he's a family man. But as far as I know, he's still active in the New England area, and he still produces music. And this was like one of the most recent albums. And this one in particular was what I would call a fan art piece. Like we would catch it, we would like we would shoot each other messages every once in a while, just be like, hey man, how's it going? Hey, it's cool, just shooting the breeze, and
Hmm.
just kind of wishing each other well and checking in and whatnot. So this one through Jukebox July, he had recently put out this single. I wanted to help signal boost it, so I drew this picture. It's called Soldiers, and the video that he has for it is like a digital kind of like ambient animation of like a very Game of Thrones esque type of thing. So it's like a suit of armor holding a sword, like in a gigantic hallway, very grandiose. Lord of the Rings, Legend of Zelda, like Elden Ring type of thing.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
like I did a drawing that was kind of like that, and yeah, so that's we are now in the first example of like the fan art piece, and he's
gotcha.
really stoked about that. I tagged him in, and he reshared it, and it was another good example of just reconnecting with someone that I had a very life defining moment, because that was the very first time that I ever break danced on a stage in front of people, and then that really kind of got the ball rolling on me then becoming a stunt performer. And then did some independent stunt work on the side, and just performance and working at amusement park work became a very big part of my life, and it all stemmed from that experience.
Mhm.
So yeah.
So now that we're moving into this era of fan art,
Yes.
when you get inspiration
Mm-hmm.
to draw something or to do something artistic, do you have to do it right away, or can you sit on it? Because I know for me, there's sometimes when I get an idea for something, it's like I need
Mm-hmm.
to do it now, or else I'm gonna forget about it.
Yeah.
Because like we've talked about, life happens, stuff
Mm-hmm.
gets in the way. So for you, are you somebody who, like, if you get inspiration, you're gonna find a way to draw it no matter what?
Mm-hmm.
Granted, you've got a 9 to 5, just like the rest of us do, right?
Yeah.
And you're busy with lots of other, you've got your own show, you've got your other
Mm-hmm.
commissions.
Yep.
So when you get an opportunity and inspiration hits, what do you do? And why is the answer,
Mm-hmm.
it depends, I'm sure.
Yeah. Honestly, I mean, that is a really great question. You're right. It depends would typically be a go-to answer for me. But in this particular case, I almost always carry a sketchbook with me. So when I
Mhm.
have an idea that comes to mind, generally speaking, if it's really good, I'll either open up my phone, open up a notes app, throw it in there, and just have like the words, that way I can revisit it later.
Yeah.
Or I will just literally rip out a design and sketch like I'll thumbnail it in a 5 minutes. Like, because going back, like I'm definitely a knee jerk illustrator in the idea that once when I get an idea, or if I'm presented with an idea, I will generally give it my full. This is what I like to call the pendulum swinging of ADHD, where it's just like
Mm,
you have your scatterbrain version of ADHD where it's hard to focus, but then that pendulum swings in the opposite direction where you have hyper focus, where all of
yep.
a sudden you can be focused on something for 8 hours and go, oh, I forgot I had a body. I need to eat food, get sleep, and then do all the stuff I just ignored for an entire day.
Yep.
So like, yeah, like you can kind of toggle between those extremes where needed. But for me, generally, if I'm inspired, or if I have an idea, I will try and rip it out on a page very very quickly, or I'll make a note of it. Generally speaking, those tend to be the ideas that are like the lightning in a bottle. I
Mhm.
found that when I have an idea, and if I roll it around, or if I'm fighting with it, if I'm like, it can get there, but like it becomes so much less. It's become such more of an agonizing prospect, instead of like, because it's kind of like the not a spoiled thing, but I think in the creative thing, you want to go for the path of least resistance. You want to make it
Mm.
feel effortless. You want to have the effortless experience. Not to say that the work that you do that you have to grind through isn't worth it, because it can be. I mean, goodness knows I've done plenty of work where I'm like, this is killing me. But then
Mhm.
eventually, after like a month, you'll finally get it there. And even though that's your experience, when you show it to the person or the people, they will experience it in a completely different way. That is not, I can drive myself nuts doing a piece, but they'll just see the end product.
They'll see.
People
Yeah.
won't. Hopefully, if you do your job well, like, you did a bad job if somebody looks at it and goes, oh man, you really
Oh.
struggled with this for a month, and you're like, oh, that's not what I wanted. I was hoping for people to look at it and be like, wow, that looks cool.
Oh.
But yeah, so yeah, you are correct. You nailed it. It can depend, but generally speaking, I love trying to be open to immediate inspiration, but also, like, I will also slow burn things if I think the ideas are worth it, and even if they're not coming to me. So like, I
Yeah.
have a list of, like, you know, generally speaking, if someone comes to me with an idea, I will almost always, within the first 5 minutes of discussing it, I will have an idea, and I will have a couple different treatments that I can throw at the person, and then we can do it back and forth. If I have an idea for my own personal work, I have way too many of them.
Mhm.
They run the gamut between, yeah, this is like I hammered this out in 5 minutes. I'm gonna ink it and then it'll be done and I'll hang it up later. But I also have way more of like, I have a small little notebook of like really like thoughtful, thought out, like, like in my head, they're in depth, very important pieces, whether they are or not, we have yet to see. But like, I do have like a small little like notebook of those types of works where I'm just like, I can't slam this out because some of these things need to be poignant. They need to be ambiguous. They need to,
Mhm.
that's where I'm trying to be like, an artist, where
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm making stuff that's open to interpretation and has
Mhm.
implied narrative and all that stuff.
Right.
But like, I do try and dabble in that world as much as I still do, comic book and basic, spot illustration. So
It's
yeah.
kind of like a pseudo, not like a wish list, but like I will get to this,
Mm,
but just that's like a
yeah.
right place, right time. You need to maybe noodle on it a little bit more,
Yeah.
or I gotcha with that.
Yeah. It's like a rainy day laundry list type of thing for sure.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go into our next three. So the next three
Sure.
we've got the new limits. We've got
Yep.
I'm hoping that it's Yucky Octopus and not
It is.
Every Spontaneous Combustion. I'm pretty sure that's the name of the song, and then Fauna.
Yep. So this is another really good batch. I will try and I know we've been at it for a while, so I'll try and edit myself. I'm sorry.
No, you're all good.
But
You're all
the
good.
new limits, yeah, okay, cool. So the new limits actually is a really great example of, this is a band that I did fan art for, and
Mhm.
then literally not more than a week ago, I was able. So this is now a band that I've done artwork for. When I had initially added it to the list, it was just because I had done fan artwork for this band. But then in the time it took for me to assemble this playlist, and then now we're recording now, I have now actually done artwork for this band.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah. New Limits. They're a third wave. They're a third wave ska act from Boston. Their guitarist Jacob Wake Up is his nickname on online. I went to UConn with him. I don't have a
mhm.
lot of friends from college. I have a couple, but I was a weird art kid in high school. I remained an weird art kid in college. So like, I do have friends, but they're few and far between from those eras. Most of my friends and my nearest dearest friends are from, non-school basically.
Yeah.
But Jake he's a really good dude. He's been this is a band that's been active and running around. They've been touring with a lot of New England bands, and they recently played through the town that I'm in, my current hometown, Northampton.
Gotcha.
And yeah, so like a couple weeks ago they swung by. But basically, Jukebox July, I put a shout out to them because they had a song called Compass that I really really liked. So I drew a compass with like the classic Scott checkers, and I linked them in it, and they really really liked it. And then they recently played through. They played through, just maybe a couple weeks ago. Got to see him play live. Made it out. Got to walked out to the show. Skanked my heart out. Bottled back because I'm old and out of shape. But it was still really a fun time. And then just catching up with Jake. Jake was like, "Hey man, we're going on tour. We're doing like a 4-day mega tour of like the East Coast. So we're going like New York. We're going Boston, Philadelphia, New York, Maryland. And a couple other places. Can you mind cracking off a tour flyer for us?" I was like, "Oh heck yeah!" And this is a good, to call back to what you were talking about. This is a great example of, they didn't really have like a very specific idea. They had like a theme. They're like, it's called the bigger wave weekend, bigger wave weekender. So I'm like, all right, cool. So are you looking for like, do you want it to be really like on the nose? Do you want it to be like a tropical, like, contradictory to winter theme? You want to be the tropical theme? They're like, yeah, whatever you want. So I was like, all right, cool. So like, I made it like I made I basically made the sign. I made like a whole, like, almost looked like a drive through sign with like the marquees, and just custom made like their logo. Had like a nice hibiscus on it. Beach in the background. Had a little sand dune buggy and then like a little king crab with like a ska hat on and a transistor radio next to it, just listening to the music. Really subtle, very very subtle reference to a band called Ska King Crab that was very popular in the regional. So yeah, so they were like, we love that. So then I cracked that off for them, and they're currently using that to promote their album, their tour that'll be in April. So yeah,
Nice.
yeah,
Okay.
that was a really fun one. And then I can actually lump Yucky Octopus and Neon Fauna into two,
Okay.
because I had mentioned Yucky Octopus earlier. So Oxen, the band that I told you about, Kristofer. This was the first band that he had done. And when I was in high school and college, they were playing out pretty routinely in Western Mass before I lived there. And I was really close friends with with a lot of friends of the band and whatnot. They're just a really interesting rock prog metal group. I love them to death. I would see them every single time I tried. Their lead singer, Tony, is this phenomenal powerhouse of a musician. Like every year he comes out with like a brand new side project, like a 12 album, like, a 12 song album out of nowhere. But like Yucky Octopus was the first band that they did that with. And this is off of their first full length album that they put out, called Adventures in Space and Science.
Okay.
And is a really great band. Like, and actually, I used to frequent a radio station when I was at UConn, 91.7 WHUS, Stores, Connecticut. I used to run like a co DJ show called Don't Tap the Glass with my friend Mark. It was like the worst possible hours. We like 12, midnight to 2 in the morning, like 3 o'clock in the morning to 5 a.m. We were just having fun. But like I knew these guys, and every single chance I could, I'd be like, dude, put on every Spontaneous Combustion. I'd be like, all right, cool. And there's just a fantastic, like really interesting progressive metal sound that I had never heard at the time, because like this was just when like metalcore was picking up steam. Like Killswitch Engage had just come out of East Hampton. All That Remains, like Shadows Fall, like all those bands were like getting their feet like through Warped Tour and touring through whatever. But Yucky Octopus was just one of the bands I wish they could have like toured with them. But yeah, so like I definitely, when Jukebox July came around, I did a whole thing because they recently put out a new album called oh boy, Neo Tokyo Champagne Death Machine.
Huh.
Which is it's an homage to Akira. So like, which is like the name of the song. And like, so I did a fan art piece based on that, where it was like the band's mascot, which is basically like an octopus, very cutesy, but like driving like the Akira motorcycle, the bike and stuff like that, and had like the laser cannon on it and stuff.
Nice.
But yeah, and then so Neon Fauna is also members of Yucky Octopus.
Oh,
So Tony is the lead singer of Yucky Octopus. He then went on to form Neon Fauna, and then Neon Fauna is currently active. Yucky Octopus was active from like 2010, I want to say, to like 2017. Then they broke up, and then Oxen formed, and then Neon Fauna formed, and they're all part of a connected group of bands that I like to call that are all from Yucky Studios, which is Chris Daniele's studio.
Gotcha.
I hope they all are not horrifically embarrassed that I'm kind of laying out this very weird local lore on a podcast. But like, Yucky Octopus was one of my favorite bands for so long. Neon Fauna, I love them to death. And that's another one I did fan art for. But yeah, so a little bit more straightforward, not as much of a back and forth. But these will be a little bit less story involved, generally speaking, in terms of like art, as far as art is involved. But yeah, that's what that is. And like for Tony, I'll even give him free advertisement right now. He put out a brand new album called Princess Ghoul. The year before that, he had a band called Mermaid Teeth. He also has a band called Very Softly. He also has another band called Phantom Command. Like like he could make his own radio station if he wanted to, of just music that he's worked on with his friends. It's so rad.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep.
All right, let's get to our next three. So we've got the bellower.
Yep.
Gotcha. Monochromatic Black and Lawn Chair Youth.
Yes.
Or did
yep.
Was
nope,
one of
okay.
these, or was one of these the edit?
One of those is the edit. So the Flag Chair Youth, that is now out. No disrespect, Flag Chair Youth is actually Lawn Chair Youth is actually a YouTube channel that specifically records and promotes bands from the South. And the band that I put on there was Flagman, and I was like, I just really like Flagman. There's no other artistic relationship to that band. I just really like Flagman. They're from Florida. They're like a more metal version of Primus, if you can imagine. So good, just ridiculous. But we'll get Flagman out of there, and then we'll just move on after those. But that's fine.
Okay.
And yeah, and that's all good. I'll just tag on my last minute substitute at the tail end of the list.
Okay.
Yeah. So
That
10
work.
Bellower. Yeah. So Bellower is a local death metal band.
Mm.
And it's one of my favorite songs by that band. I'm friends with multiple members of the band, if not all the band actually.
Hmm.
But many of those members are part of a co-op that I think I mentioned earlier. They're called Thick, the Heavy Culture Collaborative or
Hmm.
Cooperative. I'm sorry, the Heavy Culture Cooperative. It's a 200 member owned co-op. We just recent. I'm also a member owner of. We just recently opened up a brand new venue, which is a bar room and a venue room for local bands to perform through. So anyone listening, if you are a band that's touring that is in a heavy, like I mean, if you're, we play ska core, we host all types of metal, dungeon synth, anything that's heavy and considered alternative. Like if you're touring through New England, we'll set you up for a day. We'll get you a space to play in.
Nice.
It's so rad. But yeah, Bellower is definitely a band where I've done work for them, and mostly not even directly for the band, but I've done a lot of work for the band members, if that makes sense. Like because of through the connection with Thick, THCC. Yeah, so that's kind of like why that is kind of nestled in there. And like I do a lot of, I just recently painted a brand new, me and another artist named Andy Bell, who also does work with Kaiju Big Battle. I don't know if you're familiar with that at all. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
basically like it's a wrestling promotion basically that combines kaiju, Super Sentai, and professional wrestling
Yep.
into one. So you have monsters fighting in a wrestling ring with big towers, and you're just suplexing someone through a gigantic like skyscraper.
Hmm.
It's super rad. But yeah, so Andy Bell works with them. Me and him, we also just painted the sign for Thick, and because of that, I work with a lot of the band members. So
Hmm.
that's why I put Bellower on the list, and it's a really cool song. And the lead singer is very creative. Like the song "Tessellated Skin," it's about the short story that he had written about people being turned into trees, which
Oh.
I did not. Yeah, it's like I didn't expect that because just from the inference of tessellated skin, it's like, oh, this has got to be like snake related, right? He goes, no, 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 that's not what it's about. But I love that that's what you pulled from it.
Hmm.
So yeah, yeah. But it's a real cool song. Like if you for a death metal song, like it has like a nice groovy pocket to it. If that's what you're stoked about, which actually is a great segue to Monochromatic Black. Is a band that has played at a festival that I've done artwork for,
Hmm.
RPM Fest.
Oh,
So every year that I do RPM Fest, I find a band that I obsess over. Monochromatic Black was my favorite band in 2019. I think,
okay.
yeah, it was either 2019 or 2022. I can't remember. The pandemic years fried my brain, but like,
Yeah,
yeah,
I think all of us would agree with that. Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. But Monochromatic Black, once again, an amazing band. I'd never heard of them before. I'm not even that much of a black metal, death metal fan, but like, they're so sick. They're so tight. The lead singer, once again, melodic gutturals, can scream like a banshee, sing like an angel, all in the same breath. So rad. Love them so much. Closing the Gates is probably one of my favorite songs from them. They just recently put out a new album. And yeah, that's like just a band that I really, really got into. I haven't done any fan art for them, but it's kind of like this is me being like, technically it counts. It's my technically, if you will, that like they played at the festival that I had done artwork for. But yeah, they're rad.
I
Um,
count. It counts. I
yeah,
gotcha with that one.
yeah,
All right. Next three, we've got Ugly Duckling, Frenchie
cool,
and the Punk, and Moontooth.
sweet, heck yeah. Yeah, so Ugly Duckling is I really wanted to make sure I had some more hip hop involved in this because like I
Mhm.
love Gary, but I do love hip hop as well. Ugly Duckling is a band that I was introduced to. They were super old school. They're a three piece. They're a three-piece act from Southern California. They
Mhm.
have like these really awesome concept albums. One of their albums that they came out with when I was doing my stunt show job, that one of my one of my co-workers introduced me to. It's called Taste the Secret, and this
Mhm.
entire album, it's a story album basically surrounding a fast food restaurant called Meat Shake, and they have a turf war with a vegetarian restaurant across the street called the Veggie Hut, and
Huh.
the whole album is just about exploring these characters, talking about going to work, like all these songs that are just around this story. It's very like Clerks 2 coded before Clerks 2 even came out, if that makes sense. You know? but like they
Mm.
don't curse, so like a lot of their songs are just they're just really fun, good storytelling songs. Like
Mhm.
so, which is why like Turn It Up was one of my jams on this. And this is a band that I did fan artwork for Jukebox July, and the band has since dispersed, but their main guy Andy Cooper, he still produces music and still does independent stuff. He actually reached out and he reshared and he was very thankful, and I was like, oh, that's so cool that like that's like the thing about doing DIY stuff where it's like, I can run, you can make a post on Instagram to Taylor Swift and maybe Taylor will see it or not. But like if you go up to like a local band and just be like, yo, like that month where I did Jukebox July, probably referenced 20 different local bands that I'd either seen or that I respected, that I knew that they were online. And I want to say at least 17 out of those 20 reached out, were like, yo, dude, thanks for the artwork. That's so sick. Like, I really appreciate it. Reshared it. Like, that's the stuff where, like, you will talk about like building community. That's so rad. And
Mm.
that'll actually come into even bigger play as we get further down the list. So, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So Frenchie and the Punk is actually, I mentioned the steampunk stuff. Frenchie and the Punk, they're a two-piece act, touring musicians. They're like very carnival kind of traveling circus type,
Mm.
like folk kind of dark folk kind of act.
Gotcha.
Uh, yeah, they're a two-piece band member of Scott Helland and Samantha Stevenson. Scott Helland is used to be in a band. I don't know if you know any of these bands because they're all very local. Have you ever heard of a band called Dinosaur Jr.?
No, no.
That's okay. Dinosaur Jr. was kind of like a band that sort of came up around the same time. Like they were around like the old school like punk days. So
Okay.
like yeah, so Scott Helland used to be in Dinosaur Jr. Was in a couple other bands like that were very punk. Like he's the punk, and Samantha Stevenson is from Paris, so Frenchie and the Punk. That's their name. But they're amazing. They're a couple. They met doing music like in Manhattan. Like they've lived this incredible life of just traveling the world doing music. Like if I guarantee you, if I were to reach out to them today, they'd be like, oh yeah, no, we were just playing for like on this private boat, on this private yacht on the French Riviera for like this family that just really liked our music. And I'm like, how did that happen? Like they're magic people. They're
Mhm.
so magical and so cool and positive. And like and they're all DIY or die as well. I back every Kickstarter, and I've met them, and like they know I'm on first name basis with them. They're going to be playing through my home. They're going to be playing through my area in March. I'm going to try and catch up with them and stuff. But they're a really great example of the people that you meet in steampunk that you're just like, these are just cool people. It's very Ren Fairish, where you're just like, you have these traveling people that just come in, make everything super rad, and then they just go about their way and they just kind of leave these trails of happiness wherever they go.
There
So,
we go.
so I really wanted to make sure I gave them a nod because they're really sweet. They have songs that make me cry. They have songs that make me dance till my feet bleed, and they're very poignant and very earnest and very loving. So yeah,
Earnest. Love that word. It's
yeah,
and there's a quote a long time ago. There's a book. It's like I'll take earnest over cool any day of the week. So
yeah,
good call with that.
100%, dude, for
Yeah.
sure, Mike. And Moontooth. So Moontooth, this is another cheeky one, but there's a bit of a story on this one that's so incredible. But Moontooth is a band they're a prog metal act based out of Long Island, four piece. I've met them. I've met them on a number of occasions. They played the very first RPM Fest that I ever designed the logo for. I've designed the logo for RPM Fest twice. The first one I designed a heavy metal Yeti playing a guitar, cut off jeans, very bright and obnoxious. And then the second time I did it was in 2021, 2022. I designed a guitar with bat wings coming down from a UFO because like the idea is that the festival takes place in the middle of the woods and at a gun and rod fishing club basically. So you're
Right.
out in the woods. So I was like, all right, what kind of themes can I make with? Oh, cryptids. All right, cool. Yeah, Bigfoot. Yeah, I'll draw heavy metal Bigfoot. I like to call him kick ass Squatch, but they were like, well, we'll just call him heavy metal Yeti. I'm like, that's more family appropriate. You're right on that. I'll call him kick ass Squatch when I'm around.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I drew that one, and then obviously the other one being like, oh well, what happens out in the woods? In the western, in the middle of the woods. Oh, alien abductions. I'll do like the guitar alien. So that was the second one. But more on Moontooth. Moontooth is probably one of my favorite prog metal acts that have come out. I mean, they have such an amazing story. And the first time I no this The third time I saw them perform, they closed out RPM Fest. They were the last band playing, and their guitarist Nick Leese. I'm pretty sure I can tell this story because it was a very big issue, a very big thing that happened to the band. But Nick Leese is prolific guitarist. He had suffered I believe I want to say it was a brain aneurysm when they were
Ooh.
recording their third album. Yeah. So it came on very suddenly out of the blue. This happened within the last 5 years of the band's history. And Nick was basically like he wasn't feeling well. They finished up a session, wasn't feeling well, passed out, woke up in the hospital, was put into a chemically induced coma for several months to figure out so that way he could stop seizing. He was getting seizures. So finally, a couple months in the emergency room, comes out of it, suffers short-term memory loss,
Mm.
has to reteach himself how to play the album that he just wrote for the tour cycle. Has a huge like six-figure medical bill now. Puts up a GoFundMe, and because of how good the band is and how much of a support system he has, he makes his bet. He makes his money. He makes his money back. They get the money that they need to cover the medical bills. He's fine. I don't remember what the exact amount is, but it doesn't matter. He got the extra he gave back to people, and he kind of reimbursed it back into certain things. And I want to say that this was one of their first shows back when I saw this band play.
Wow.
And their first song, their first song was Alpha Howl. And it's an amazing, incredible song. I wish I could find it in a karaoke version. I would sing it till my throat bleeds. It's an incredible song. Their music video for it's very cool. They do a scene by scene rebuild of a scene from Goodfellas, or if it's either Goodfellas or Casino, whichever one where Joe Pesci like gets his butt kicked. Whatever scene that's in, I can't remember. I'm sorry,
I mean,
but
there
yeah,
kind of happens in both, but
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
I gotcha
Yeah,
though.
yeah. So like very cool, but basically they don't even hit. So they're playing, and everyone and it's a full house. A couple hundred, 100 or so people are playing this band. Not a big turnout. It's on a Sunday. It's their last act of the night. I'm very everyone's tired, exhausted. They've been up moshing for 3 days straight. But they get to the first. They don't even get to the first chorus, and all of a sudden the guitar pops off, and everyone's like, "What's going on?" Like, Rhodey, what's going on? Is it electrical? And then they look over, and Nick is standing there like a zombie. He's stopped playing, and he's just kind of zoned out, zonked out. And everyone's like, "Whoa, what's going on?" And everyone that knows the band, because like I said, RPM Fest is a tightly woven community of people. Like everyone knows everyone. Generally speaking, if you're there, it's because you know what's up.
Hmm.
So like everyone knew what was going on. They were like, "Oh shit, Nick's having an issue," you know. And the band like immediately drops what they're doing, and they go to help him. Security takes him up. Nick, he's a skinnier fellow. So like security just hoists him up over his shoulder, brings him down to a med tent, and like lead singer comes out and he's like, "Hey man, you guys, what's going on with Nick? Like, I mean, he should be okay. Like, we're just gonna check on him. Give us like 5 minutes." And everyone's like, "Don't worry. Like, just make sure you're okay. We're not mad." Like, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And like literally 10 minutes go by, and then he comes back on stage, and the whole band comes back on site. And like Nick, without skipping a flipping beat, comes up to the mic and he just kind of goes, "Hey guys, my brain broke. Do you mind if I borrow yours?" And then they go into finishing up their entire 40-minute set. A
Wow.
prog metal act, 4-person. He was the only guitarist in a prog metal act. Prolific guitarist, still killed it, still played in between songs, apologizing. And we're like, "Stop saying sorry. We're just glad you're still alive, dude."
Right.
Like it was so, man, like I get misty eyed just thinking about it, because it was
Mhm.
so, like that's the type of stuff that makes me so connected to the music. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Yeah.
Like there are people that are like that love it so much and love the community so much that it's like that. So
That's
yeah,
it's a great story, and thanks
thank
for
you.
sharing that. That's awesome. So,
No problem.
all
Yeah,
right.
take the
Final
home stretch. Yes,
final three. So, this one it's a Weird Al Dare to Be Stupid cover. I think
it
it's
is.
Mutoid Man, or is it 2
Yes.
minutes? Okay, so Mutoid
So
Man.
the answer to that question is yes. It's both.
Got it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So like I can give you the idea of this one. Sorry to cut you off too. I know
Go,
we're
go.
breaking up the batch, but
It's
yeah.
all
So
good.
it's kind of a bigger 2 minutes to late night. It's a Brooklyn based comedy metal troupe, believe it or
Ah,
not. It's a group
gotcha.
of people. The lead singer of like the host of, so yeah, how do I describe this? I stumbled across this during the pandemic years for sure. But it's a group of people that live in Brooklyn that are metalheads. They all hang out at a bar called St. Vitus Bar in Brooklyn, New York. It's since
Huh.
I believe it's a very well known metal bar, very like heavy metal, very heavy metal focused. So it's like if you have a metal act touring, they're generally going to be stopping there. And this is just was the base of operations where these group of comedians and writers and musicians just got together and made a show. It's a late night heavy metal show called 2 Minutes to Late Night,
Hmm.
and it's the host is a metalhead who wears corpse paint called Arsenio Hall, and yeah,
Bravo.
major part.
Bravo.
Yes, and their house band, it comprises of members of very prolific metal bands. So there's Steven Brodsky, who's their house band is Mutoid Man, which is
Okay.
a doom metal three-piece act, but they have a couple other members that
Hmm.
also play keyboard and whatnot. Lucy, I believe. No, in any event. But Mutoid Man is also comprised of Steven Brodsky at the time, Ben Kohler, who's the drummer, who's also was the drummer for Converge, who is a very, very prolific progressive metal band in the 2010s.
Ah.
Like no, like very big, like staple in the noise metal category.
Mm.
So like, but they were the house band. It was very silly. They had like one season of content where like 6 episodes. They just brought in all their friends from like, they had people from Mastodon show up. They had people from Suicidal Tendencies, all DIY. But then when the pandemic hit, they still wanted to keep making content. So they did the thing where like, oh, bands we're going to record remotely, and then we're just going to put this together. And this is one of their songs that they put out. Yeah. So it is Mutoid Man plus members of Converge and Cole, I think the other band is. But yeah, it's just a bunch of other bands, and it's just a very fun take on a classic song. But
Gotcha.
yeah, you know,
Okay, so the final two. So
mm-hmm.
we've got a song called "The End Is Nigh"
Yep,
by This Way to the Egress,
yep. This way to the Egress. Yep.
and then you've got a song called "Call of the Mothman" from Almost Honest.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, perfect. And also, and I'll wrap this up in 5 seconds or less. So I did do fan art for 2 Minutes to Late Night. They had an episode where they had a fake bat as a main character called Chris the Bat. So I drew Chris the Bat wrapped around their logo, and their Jordan Olds is the actual person who plays Arsenio Hall. He was very stoked. He was like, "Oh, Chris the Bat," and then he shared it on his social media. So
Nice.
that's where the artwork came in on that one.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, but this way to the aggress is I'll reverse those because the end is nigh is much more poetic in terms of the end of the playlist.
Okay.
But yeah. So, but Almost Honest is a doom metal band from Pennsylvania that I saw them play live. They played through New England a ways away, and I'm a big cryptid fan. I've actually guested on a couple podcasts where I talked about Mothman specifically.
Mm,
There's a podcast called the Caffeinated Cryptid podcast. They did a Summer of Mothman last year. It's on YouTube. I talk in very gratuitous, in depth detail about Mothman, and we
mhm.
actually even talk about like Mothman sightings that happened up in Chicago for a hot minute. There were a couple sightings that were in line with Mothman at the time, believe it or not. Yeah, like the humanoid flying shadow creature flying between the buildings and whatnot. We're flying where the wings weren't moving and stuff like that. I'll spare you the rest if you want. You can go find it yourself. Don't worry about it.
Gotcha.
But because of that, I was a big fan of the band. Like I said, very DIY indie, and for Jukebox July, call the Mothman. Had to do it. Drew a picture of Mothman, tagged them in it. They liked it so much they actually shot me a couple bucks over. I mailed it to them. They have it hanging up in their recording studio, which is really rad.
Nice.
And yeah, so that brings us to this way to the aggress. There was another one. You know what? That's fine. We can just this is enough. This way to the aggress. We can end on this lovely note, pun intended, on a playlist. But this way to the aggress is another steampunk band that I met through steampunk conventions in Jersey. They are a new. They're, I guess the way I can best describe them, they are a New Orleans jazz band, but like also a marching band.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're very like, I hope this makes sense. They're very Tom Waitsy, if that
Yeah,
makes any sense to you, you know?
yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah. Like they have like one of my favorite songs by them that is not and is not is called Pocket Change. And it's just basically about how every year they will travel down to New Orleans during Mardi Gras. It's actually very thematically appropriate. I forgot. Yeah. Mardi Gras coming up.
Coming
Right.
up. Yeah,
That's pat myself on the back for that one.
there we go.
But yeah, so but like they have a song called Pocket Change, and the song is all about them going to Mardi Gras and then and paying their way by just playing for pocket change. It makes the world go round. But this song, "The End Is Nigh," is just it's a really good song that they play that they play during their sets as well, and they're just really really fun. Like they're a very fun band. Like they're a marching band basically, but
Mm.
just with the rough and tumble exterior of like a Tom Waits type of vibe. And I've done fan artwork for them before. Sarah, who's one of the co-founders of the band, I've done artwork for side projects of hers. And yeah, and Taylor, I believe. I
Hmm.
have a thank you note from one of them because they're another great band that they'll put out a Kickstarter to crowdsource a new album every couple years.
Hmm.
And but yeah, that once again, that's another one where it's just like yeah, if they were supposed, if you could, not to jump to any conclusion, but I think like this way to the aggress is a really great example of the overall theme of this is that music brings people together, and like the experience of listening to and engaging with music in a live capacity is just such a special thing. So yeah, that's why I put down "The End Is Nigh." I think that was a really good button on
Well said. So, well, we did it. We got through the entire
it.
list. Lots of great
Yeah.
stories, lots of great insight with this.
Mhm.
Got lots of new stuff to listen to. So I thank you
Awesome.
for that. I greatly
Mhm.
appreciate it. Final question I have for you before I let you off the hook. If this CD was an actual album cover, what would you do for it?
So when you mentioned me that that was going to be the question, I ended up sketching up what that album is going to be. I'm going to try and get it to you in the
Okay.
next couple of days, or if I at least can send you a picture. But for me, these are all acts that I've done artwork for, or these are all also musicians and bands that I listen to while I draw. So because of that, the album that I would call this, it's I'm going to call it Drawing Board Radio, a sketchbook sampler.
Nice.
Yeah. So, and the I'll give you an idea of what it's looking like so far. I have it as a 7x7 illustration. It looks like an old transistor radio, but the dial is a pencil, and then the radio portion where the speaker is, that will be the marquee that will have the listing of all the different bands that are featured on it. Yeah.
I'm very much looking forward to seeing what you've got for a sketch with that. That's awesome. So,
Awesome.
well, Brett, thank you very much for, just sharing your experience, sharing your story, sharing your art in a audio only format. So,
Sure.
no, I greatly appreciate it. Loved hearing your stories. Love hearing, how everything has gone for you. So, where can the people find you? And do you have anything that you'd like to plug?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. You can find me at BK Artworks, BKARTWORKS, just all one word on Instagram. That's really where I do all my fun stuff. And that's, yeah, you just go there and that'll point you wherever you're going, wherever I'm going. So simple, make it nice and simple. And also thanks so much, Mike, for interviewing me. I'm sorry. I know this is a long one, so I'm sorry for talking so long, but
Oh
I
no.
hope you enjoyed it.
Oh no,
Um,
no, don't ever apologize for
okay.
great stories.
Great.
Yeah, just like a lot of different angles, a lot of different things, and a lot of
Yeah.
things to chew on. So
Sure.
I think this is gonna be a good
Awesome.
one. So awesome.
Okay.
So appreciate it, and
Mhm.
looking forward. Maybe at some point, if you'd be willing to do a volume two, I'd love to have you
Yeah.
back.
I'd be honored. I like I said, I spent all my life listening to music, so like I pull up playlists like nobody's business went for friends and whatnot. So I'm more than happy to do that. So yeah, it's been great meeting you and talking with you, Mike. Yeah, and also if you're listening, thank you. keep listening, and I hope you keep coming back.
Awesome. Appreciate that.
Heck yeah.
Well, my friends, the time has come to end this episode of Mix CD. Be sure to like, rate, and subscribe to anything and everything SPDM Crew wherever you get your podcast. Join us on social media on Facebook, Instagram, X, Threads, YouTube, and Blue Sky at SPDM Crew. Check out our website soon to be out at spdmcrew.com. You could follow our playlist on Spotify and Apple Music at Mike Hilty. Shout out to HiFlyer Creative Studios for making our awesome logo. Greatly appreciate their support. And if you have any marketing, logo, or brand standard needs, contact them at highflyercreative.com. If you've got a podcast idea or you're interested in being part of the SPDM crew as a guest or collaborating, email us at spdmcrew@gmail.com. Until next time, no matter what happens now, you shouldn't be afraid because I know today has been the most perfect day I've ever seen.